金钱看齐，墙上写着秦香莲的32岁了，转个当朝，驸马郎的旗帜王啊，满皇上的22岁了，转个当朝。金钱看齐，墙上写着秦香莲的32岁了，转个当朝，驸马郎的旗帜王啊，满皇上的22岁了，转个当朝。
Hey, what's up? Chinese Warlord Era. So, basically back near the end of the Qing dynasty, the Taiping Rebellion was going on, where the majority Han Chinese were revolting against the Manchurian rulers, probably because of those wacky haircuts, which forced the Qing to allow provincial governors to raise their own armies, called Yin-Yang, or Yang-Ying, same difference, to fight against the Taiping Rebellion. The Qing eventually fell as a result of the revolts and other outside factors, and many of these provincial forces did not disband. The most direct cause, though, was the Xinhai Revolution, which directly overthrew the Qing and established the Republic of China. After the death of the de facto dictator, Yuan Shikai, control of China was divided among military cliques and other regional factions. This period of rival coalitions was called the Chinese Warlord Era. This time from 1916 to 1928 was one of the most interesting times in Chinese history, with dynamic warlords and a tangled web of conflicts.
Alright, Samurai Sam here with Warlord Era China. So, like Alex was saying, is going to start with the fall of the Qing dynasty, and in its place will rise two main political leaders. Not these guys. Yuan Shikai and Sun Yat-sen. So, first up, Sun Yat-sen. He was the founder of the Chinese Nationalist Party, also called the Goat-Maidan. Three principles of the people that he had. One, nationalism. With nationalism, he sought to unite China and fight against the foreign control and warlord control. Okay, democracy. With democracy, he heavily encouraged democratic principles and wanted to implement into Chinese society. And finally, economic improvement. With this, he wanted to raise the overall economic standard of citizens in China during the time. So, you can imagine at a time when warlords were constantly suppressing and exploiting their peasants, these principles gained popularity fast. So, next up, Yuan Shikai. Yuan Shikai, despite the cool mustache, he is not that great. Sun Yat-sen, due to having less supporters, will have to defer his power to Yuan Shikai, which then will allow Yuan Shikai to become a dictator. He did some things that didn't really go anywhere, like trying to restore a hereditary monarchy, which failed. But what was important was his death. So, with his death, it left China without a serious central government, leaving its provinces in the hands of regional warlords. Which brings us to our next slide, if I can get there. Boom.
First up is one of China's most infamous warlords, who also just happens to be one of my favorites, General Chang Chong-chang, or Zhang Zhongchang, however you want to pronounce that. Zhang was born in China to an alcoholic father who would beat him regularly, and a mother who was an exorcist and a practicing witch. After his parents divorced, he moved to Manchuria with his mother, where he took up many small jobs. Later in his life, he moved to Siberia. He took up small jobs there too, but he was primarily drawn to crime and joined many bandit gangs throughout his life. But later in his life, he led a bandit gang in China and rose to power in the Chinese province of Shandong, where he became a warlord. Now, in Shandong, he was known as the Dog Meat General, based on his favorite high-stakes gambling game in which he would gamble tens of thousands of dollars a day on. Now, but he had many other nicknames too, many relating to his large endowment. Prostitutes would call him the General with 3 long legs. Others would call him Old 86 because his member was said to be 86 Mexican silver dollars long, which was a common currency in China at the time. Again, others would call him the 72 Cannon Chang for the same reason. Now, this guy was known for his 3 don't knows. He once claimed he didn't know how much money he had, how many troops he controlled, or how many wives he was married to. Now, this guy was a womanizer. He had between 30 and 50 concubines, and he could never remember all their names, so he gave them numbers, but he commonly forgot their numbers. I mean, he couldn't even speak most of the languages his wives spoke. He had wives from China, Japan, Russia, Korea, Mongolia, France, and at least 1 American concubine. Now, this guy, Every day he ate black chow chow dogs because he believed it would increase his fertility, which now we know is not true. But stereotype comes from somewhere. Uh, he was crazy. He once went to Japan and accidentally shot and killed the cousin of the last Chinese emperor, who just happened to be sleeping with one of his concubines. And then for the murder, the Japanese court made him pay just $150 or 10 days in prison. And of course, he just paid the $150. But once, when Shandong was facing a drought, he wrote a poem threatening to call artillery strikes on God if it did not rain. And then it did not rain, so he marched down to the temple, slapped the statue of the Dragon King multiple times, and then ordered his troops to fire artillery in the sky for hours. I mean, once he claimed he would either come back from battle victorious or in a coffin, and then after losing the battle, he paraded around Shandong smoking a cigar while sitting in a coffin. But what I remember him most for was his masterful poetry. I'll read them for you right now. Visiting Mount Tai by Zhang Zhongchang. From afar, Mount Tai looks blackish, narrow on top and wide at the bottom. If you flipped it upside down, it would be narrow at the bottom and wide up top. Pure poetry. He wrote other poems too, like his poem threatening the Dragon King for rain and his poem about bastards, but I won't read those to you right now because we have a time for him to fit. He was not a good guy though. He had a hobby of splitting the skulls of his prisoners with a sword, and he called it melon smashing. He also hung political dissidents from telephone wires. But I mean, he was a big guy. People were intimidated by him. He was called the Lanky General because he was 6'6". His rivals described him as the physique of an elephant, the brain of a pig, and the temperament of a tiger.
Okay, so after Zhang Zongchang came Han Fuck You. Fuck You was an avid gambler when he was younger, which led him to accumulating so much gambling debt that he had to run away. Fuck You joined the army, where he rose through the ranks fast. One of his military campaigns resulted in him overtaking Zhangzongcheng Shandong province, and following that he defeated the rival warlord Li Xinyan, who controlled the eastern part of that province. By autumn 1932.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct, but it's wordy and hard to read. It undermines the writer's message, and the word choice is bland. Grammarly's cutting-edge technology helps you craft compelling, understandable writing that makes an impact on your reader. Much better. Are you ready to give it a try? Installation is simple and free. Visit Grammarly.com today.
He not only had unified his Shandong province, but he also sided with the Kuomintang. Now, he will, through military conquest and through commercial operations, primarily in cotton, tobacco, and real estate, grow rich and generously give to schools, hospitals, and civic improvements. Okay, so now we're on to the end of Warlord era with Chiang Kai-shek. So, Sun Yat-sen, who, like I said before, was the leader of the Kuomintang, will die in 1925, and his successor will be Chiang Kai-shek. Now, Shrek will be supported by the West because he strongly opposed communism. Okay, and that's going to give him a lot of support. Now, the other political party at the time was the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, which was headed by Mao Zedong. So, Shrek had a limited commitment to democracy, but again, it's mostly his opposition to communism that is going to gain him the support he needs. Despite this, however, he will actually briefly ally with the CCP in order to defeat and put an end to the warlord reign in China. Now, once the warlords are stopped, a civil war will erupt between the Kuomintang and the CCP. So, we got some helpful infographics and maps here and stuff to check out. Okay, great.
Right, now we're going to go over to the end of the Chinese Warlord era. And yeah, so basically, even though there were some fierce rivals, the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, and the Kuomintang made an alliance in 1924 to end warlordism in China, as it was getting kind of out of hand. Together, they formed the National Revolutionary Army, and in 1926, they set out on a northern expedition to march north and defeat many of the warlords controlling territory in China. The northern expedition would end in late 1928 with the result of the National Revolutionary Army taking Beijing from other governments and marking the reunification of China. One of the defeated warlords in this movement, Zhang Zongchang, who was mentioned pretty extensively earlier, would lead a rebellion against the new Nanjing government, which was formed by the nationalists after the Northern Expedition as a peacetime government. While this rebellion was put down pretty quickly, it demonstrated the Nanjing's government's shaky hold on China's territory. As the leader of the new Nanjing government, Chiang Kai-shek tried to cut back on military power during peacetime. Many warlords who still had access to their armies renounced their allegiance to the KMT. A struggle for supremacy started and broke into an armed conflict in 1929-30, which was called the Central Plains War. Although Chiang would end up winning, warlordism would continue in China, laying groundwork for the Chinese Civil War. In 1927, a 10-year armed struggle would start between the Communist Red Army and the Kuomintang. In this decade, the Communists were eventually encircled by the Kuomintang forces and were forced to make a massive retreat of 12,500 kilometers, known as the Long March. This decade was ended by the Second Sino-Japanese War, which was between China and Japan in the Pacific theater of the Second World War. This new enemy would force both Communist and Kuomintang forces alike to form a temporary treaty to address the threat at hand. Eventually, China would win along with the Allies in World War II and would regain taken territories from Japan that Japan had taken from them. After this, the civil war between the Communist and Kuomintang forces would resume due to the Communist Party's forces growing significantly to 3.2 million troops over the Second Sino-Japanese War. Eventually, the Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, would win the Civil War, taking over the entire Chinese mainland, completely replacing the Kuomintang in 1951. Mao Zedong and his predecessors would eventually lead China to where it is today.